Three, two, one. Hey everyone, and welcome to the July edition of 3030. I am Pat Reinhart, your humble host here at Conductor. And everybody, congratulations to Team Argentina. Now, you might be wondering, Pat, you live in the United States. Why are you so high on Argentina today? That's because I have an awesome portion of my team that is from Argentina, and I am with them spiritually right now since the United States is out of it. Go Argentina. And for all you Spain fans, that's cool too, like go soccer. But anyway, let's see what we're going to be talking about today. Number one, we're going to go through the July industry review. Today we're going through legal product review sites and property management, which was by far the most requested last month. So that's cool. We're going to talk about why LLMs care about your expertise above all else, which is something that we are noticing in our data and the types of sites that are being cited, and also the types of things that you are starting to see gain responses and mentions in LLMs. We're also going to talk about you now having the ability to connect your social channels to Google Search Console, which is pretty cool. We're also going to talk about Google's new search profiles for creators and publishers. And then we're going to round it out with talking about the goal that you should set for yourself from an AI search perspective, which is not just more mentions and citations, but actually achieving more positive or disproportionately positive recommendations. But let's get into it because we only have 30 minutes. Number one, everybody, July was somewhat of a quiet month from a traditional standpoint. Yes, the June update, the June spam update, completed rolling out. That was widespread. We did see a lot of, movement there, but nothing really to say, to crawl home about, or write home about, rather, I think is the saying. But ultimately, I'll show some of that data here, but I did want to show some new graphs that I have access to, which is looking into Conductor's database. So from an AI perspective, as you can see, we look at a lot of sessions, across our data, over 5 billion sessions here. So, and when you look at the referral traffic, there's actually some interesting stories over here. Number one, consumer staples. So these are things like retail would be in here, and things of that nature fell off a cliff from an AI referral traffic standpoint, which is interesting because a lot of the sites that that were talking to me about seeing a large surge over the last few months happen to fall into this category, which makes sense because right after the March update through April, we actually did see quite a big spike in consumer staples and those types of sites from an AI AI referral session standpoint. But when you see here that it was definitely like kind of the runaway leader, but it crashed about 39%, in a single month to about 3.14% in July. So whatever was driving that spring surge, again, that is over. Maybe it was Google turned the dial up on that, turned dial down. Maybe the LLMs were really favoring it. But ultimately, when you looked at, and another view I could have shown here is which LLM was prominent during this time, and it was very much ChatGPT. So let me rewind that statement. Maybe OpenAI was turning the dial up and turning the dial down a little bit, but something definitely changed, this month. 4 industries, kind of flipped the switch and started to actually see some movement. Healthcare was up 21%, financials up 18%, materials up 16%, and industrials up 15% as well. All accelerated, pretty massively from June to July. And again, while consumer staples was crashing, definitely was not noise. It's just kind of like a rotation that we're seeing happening in our data, which is really interesting. Real estate is finally starting to see something happen. This has actually been one of the flattest, of the industries, over time. And ultimately, June to July, again, not, first uptick, really of the year. Since the beginning of January. So it's up 6.4%. It's small, but again, first green shoot in 6 months for the real estate industry, showing a little bit of life there, right? And then to round out, the findings here, communication services and consumer discretionary, kind of went the other way. These were the areas that we saw heading the wrong way. Both have been climbing steadily since May. That reversed from June to July, with communication services diving about 17% and consumer discretionary going down about 6%. They were really the only other categories or industries, I should say, that saw negative movement here outside of consumer staples. So again, a lot of retail, consumer discretionary, consumer that was and consumer staples, a lot of those things, that's where like retail falls, makeup, cosmetics, et cetera. So ultimately, definitely some massive movement there. Now the other cool thing is we're going to see a lot more data moving forward on 3030. Now that I have access to really dive into each of our industries and sub-industries, and this is only going to get better over time, expect more in-depth graphs like this and more in-depth data. But that does not mean that I'm going to abandon how I look at things, from a trending standpoint. So back to Old Faithful, and let's talk about the different industries that y'all recommended last month. So number one requested was property management companies. So we're going to start there. I looked across, all the top ones in our data, and I pulled out, as always, 3 that represented the trends that I was seeing. Let's start with Greystar, which is one of the largest, if not the largest, property management company in the country. Having a decent year, up 6% in page 1 visibility, and was definitely, hit a little bit of a slump here, as you can see, around the holidays, but really has been a steady gain, again, hitting about 6% in page 1 visibility from a traditional standpoint, over time, and did not fall prey to the May core update, which definitely impacted other areas that we will get to. Let's look at Cushman and Wakefield. Again, another site, a little bit of a roller coaster, but still landed up about 6%. But you can see here that the May core update definitely had an impact on this site. And again, the interesting part about these sites is that what I found is, even though you're seeing here, like, it's like, hey, like Greystar, 40,000 keywords, Cushman and Wakefield probably topped out at like 20,000 keywords. Some of these large property management companies, their sites are very small when it comes to the content that they actually create. What most of their site is, or what most of their sites are, rather, are property listings, which really aren't getting picked, which really aren't ranking for their sites. So these sites actually don't rank for a ton of keywords, even though they are these massive companies. Like, I think Greystar manages like almost a million properties across the United States, and Cushman and Wakefield is somewhere around like 700,000, something crazy like that. But ultimately, that was an interesting finding, from this as well, just from the property manager standpoint. Their sites may look big, but most of it is the listings, like the property listings. Their content that they actually own and control and create, it's actually not that large. Last off, we'll start with a smaller company, BH Management Services, although still a large property management company. They're having a good year, seeing a 10% increase in page 1 visibility, and the May core update actually really helped them out, and they started to see a surge there. So the call on property management is that it was a very mixed bag. Most sites were up, but a lot of them, there was a lot of movement. Like, even here, you can see a little bit of an up and down. Cushman and Wakefield was definitely a little bit of a roller coaster, and then Greystar kind of up and to the right, but Star had a little trouble around the holidays. Now, the interesting part is, as expected, AI overview coverage is growing, or at least grew over the last 30 days for these, for this area, right? Looking across, like the few hundred properties that I was looking at, most showed this trend where, again, they were kind of up. Everyone hit the March surge, which pretty much every site that we've looked at up until now had that March surge. And then from May, down a little bit, definitely impacted by the May core algorithm update. But then ultimately in July, hitting the, definitely from June to July, hitting that upswing. So from there, next one. we're going into legal. This was the next. This is actually one that people have been asking for a while. And again, for anyone that's new here, the way that we pick these is that it's audience requested. So if you want me to look into your industry next time around, just throw it in the chat at any time. We pick the most requested. The most requested industries are the ones that always get picked. And as long as they haven't been covered in the last couple of months, I will do them again, even if it's repeat. So if you have an industry that you want, chuck it down into the comments right now, and I will get there. I will get there eventually. And ask anyone who's come here. I always get there because we get a lot of requests usually. But okay, let's get into legal. So when I was looking at legal, there's so many different ways that you can take legal. So I kind of tried to spread it around different specialties, right? But also, of course, we're looking at bigger, typically bigger companies here. So Kirkland Ellis, one of the largest law firms in the country, basically flat year over year, seeing a 1% decline. They were definitely impacted by the May core update. So a little bit of a surge, towards the beginning of the year, and they were climbing up. But again, they're pretty much flat year over year. DLA Piper, again, another huge law firm, seen good progress, 24% increase in top 10 visibility. But again, you can see here the same pattern as the other guys, is that in around the holidays, around the holiday updates, these sites actually did really well and were climbing. And then March, was a little down, but then there's this little chunk that gets cut out in May. So again, the May core update definitely impacting this sector as well. And then had to go with Morgan & Morgan for the people. I see these commercials all the time. They're actually an amazing customer of ours. Definitely having a roller coaster year right now. The May core update was not kind. Personal injury, talk about it. They should sue Google, but ultimately still wound up with a 2% increase. So the site's still up overall, but it was really interesting what I've seen. Again, if you look across all three sectors that I'm looking at, what are you seeing? You're seeing a little bit of a roller coaster here, right? Everyone is kind of, is either climbing, then dipping a little bit, then coming back, but no one is straight to the right. There's been a lot of volatility over the last, definitely over the last 12 months, but really since the beginning of this year, it's been a little bit of a wild ride for everybody with all, the different updates that rolled out. Again, the June spam update, was widespread. We saw a lot of movement there, but ultimately from here, even though they wound up, most of these sites were the May core update was much bigger than I think a lot of people thought it was, and it was more widespread and cut deeper in a lot of industries that you wouldn't necessarily think. Now, an area that legal is doing, again, mostly good is in AI overview coverage. Again, that's not surprising. Morgan & Morgan actually went up from June to July, as did DL Piper and Kirkland. So pretty much everyone is up and to the right, for the month over the last 30 days. But it's interesting to see the different patterns of how these different sites react, because they're all different sizes. I mean, it's like DLA Piper, it's a very somewhat small site, whereas Morgan & Morgan site is 10x the size of it, or 5x the size of it. And again, Kirkland, which is again one of the largest law firms in the country, their site is not that big. And so when you're looking around, it's really interesting to see how these large law firms, again, they're in the courtroom, they're not necessarily on the website, but ultimately all these sites did well over the last year. But the May core update was definitely definitely problematic. So that is what I'm seeing in the industry. Definitely a lot of volatility this year. 2026 was very volatile overall, but June to July was mostly positive for people. But the May core update definitely had a huge impact on pretty much all of these different sectors. And again, if you want me to review your industry, just chuck it down to the comments. I see a ton in there already, and we will get to it. I promise you. And thank you again for your participation. Let's move on to the next one, which is product review sites. So this one was interesting. So looking at this, this sector is getting a lot of benefit from the AI revolution right now, right? So when I said hey, that's it for the I want to say that was kind of it for the normal sectors that we were talking about. I want to talk about product reviews and just reviews and rating sites in general, which I think are in a special place right now. So let's look at consumer reports. rocking and rolling, a 79% increase in page one visibility, which again continues the trend of real reviews and real opinions dominating the SERPs. So we're seeing this in the LLMs as well. I actually have another slide on that with a lot of data around it. But ultimately, Consumer Report is absolutely smashing right now. The trend continues with G2, 96% increase year over year in top 10 visibility. Why? Because Google, LLMs, all these sites, like where people are heading, everyone likes real people having real conversations about your brand. And where are people having these conversations? It's on these review sites. It's on these rating sites. How are LLMs and even Google, from a traditional standpoint, determining if your product or services is good and you're the right value? They're going to these review sites and they're highly citing them, which again, we will get to in a minute. And then rounding out with the biggest one was Trustpilot. Trustpilot is absolutely destroying right now. Seeing 152% increase in page one visibility year over year, which is wild. But think about this. Where we're at in the world right now from a search perspective, this is what everyone cares about. It's real reviews. Does your product do what it says it's supposed to do? Do influencers on YouTube talk about you? Do people argue about you on Reddit? When people ask a question, are you the product that is recommended? That is how you get to that, that golden metric that we call it, which is that disproportionately positive recommendation, is that you have not only great content on your site, but the conversation around your brand is amazing as well. And people are saying it's a great experience, it's a great product, et cetera, et cetera. And we're actually going to get to more about that in just a few minutes. And when looking at this, you can also see that, from an AI overview perspective, highly, highly favored. And they're growing at the largest clip out of any sector, that we've looked at actually over the last 6 months. Like, these rating sites are absolutely smashing right now. And it's interesting to see large content hub sites doing poorly in traditional search, like your NerdWallets, your Bankrates, et cetera, like really struggling right now, even though they have great content on their sites. And again, you're seeing these rating sites that are absolutely, and these social sites, which are absolutely going up and to the right, and like literal rocket ships. So that is something to take into account when you're thinking about your strategy, is how can I influence that conversation on sites like this about my product or services, because this is what's being cited and all of that. And again, like social platforms, et cetera, which again, we're going to get into right now. So it's becoming clear to me that expertise is what LLMs are really caring about above all else. What you're looking at here is the CEO of Yale Appliances. I chose this because I used to own an appliance company and I know all about them. They're actually one of my old competitors, and I've actually met Steve before. And ultimately, what they're doing right is that Steve, their CEO, is the face of the company. Right? He is a person that is connected to the brand, right? Yes, we are on the brand's YouTube page, and we are seeing that this person is in a million of their videos, right? And it's such a smart move, because it's not just like voice of God content coming from Yale Appliances. It is the CEO of Yale Appliances explaining to you why this product is good, why this service works the way that it does. And they have hundreds of these videos. It's unbelievable. And he's in most of them. And again, what do LLMs and Google really love right now? It's connecting experts and expertise to the question that people are asking of them. And if there's one thing that you can do this year that will have the largest impact on your campaign, it will be to connect your content, whatever that content is, if it's an article, if it's a video, whatever it is, to a person at your company or an expert at your company. Right? Don't just say, hey, this is my brand's POV on this. Say, no, this is Steve or Pat or Sam from XYZ company, right? And we're experts. We've been in this industry for XYZ years. And when LLMs go out into the world, they will discover that, oh wow, all these entities, there's an entity here that are connected to all these other entities, and this person is really respected here, and there's a lot of talk about this company. I'm going to recommend them because I can see that it's largely a positive, a positive experience. And when you see it, when you look into the data, it becomes even more clear based on the sites that are being cited or the domains that are being cited. So what you're looking at here, this is across everything that we are tracking. This is tens of millions of prompts and citations and mentions, et cetera, et cetera. And what you're looking at on the left is the total pie, right? The interesting part, and should not shock anyone, is that the largest piece of the pie is fractional. It's like, there's a huge amount of variety. I think more variety than anyone really recognizes that is being cited when people are asking questions, right? Like there's a whole host of domains and brands that are being cited. But when you look at the top, just look at the top 7, and when you take the other bucket out of it, right? What do you see? What is the most cited domain there? It's YouTube. And as I said I think it was a couple of episodes ago, we covered the 7-month study that we did here at Conductor looking at consistency. What was the most cited domain or the most consistently cited domain in that study? It was YouTube. And that should tell you that it is time to start making video if you do not spend time on video. Video is important to the future of your campaign and the future of your company. And I'm telling you right now, find someone who's comfortable getting in front of the camera and have them create video for you, because that is what's happening. And then look at what's next. Yes, Google.com, because Google, if you're in Gemini or AI mode or AI overviews, they actually send you to Google.com a lot, to another search result. But ultimately, the next, look what it is. It's Reddit, right? That makes sense. Then the next one is Facebook. The next one is LinkedIn. The next one's Instagram, and then Wikipedia. And then it goes down into brand sites, just based on the data set. But across tens of millions of prompts and mentions, the sites that are showing up the most are social sites and sites where people are having conversations about you. The top 2, Google, YouTube and Reddit. That is that they hold most of the power here. But it's interesting to see Facebook and LinkedIn, because number one, I thought Facebook actually blocked LLMs from crawling and citing content. So that's interesting. So that's something I'm actually going to dig into a little bit more. But Instagram, and LinkedIn as well, they are looking for real people with real opinions and real POVs, and those people debating and having that debate, which is not something new. Like we've talked about this before, right? But just think about that as you're moving through your campaign, because ultimately, YouTube has continues to widen its lead from month to month, is what we've seen, right? And again, like LinkedIn is actually growing over time as well. Again, more fractional than what YouTube and Reddit are. Those are still where most citations are coming from, still the most cited domains. But it's really interesting to see how this changes over time. But one thing that's been very consistent is that YouTube is highly cited and consistently cited. So keep that in mind as you're planning, your time moving forward. So next time. So let's get to the next things. A couple of quick ones, and I'm going to end on something I've been talking about a lot. Cool thing, new thing in Search Console. You can now actually connect your social channels to Google Search Console and see how they're showing up in search, which is really cool. Basically, they're called platform properties. And what they are is, you can think of like your website, as a property in Google Search Console. You can now connect your Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, or X, and YouTube account directly to it as a separate property, which I think is super cool. Lets creators and publishers get a consolidated view about how you're showing up in Google and on Google properties. I think it's really cool. Again, like what you really get is, it's 3 reports. It's in the performance report. You get clicks, impressions, and queries. There are some insights like trends and your top posts, and achievements, like milestones over 28 days. So like very, showing like which search terms drive traffic to specific posts, which could be really interesting from an analysis standpoint. And right now they just started rolling this out on July 7th. Be gradually rolling out. I know many people don't have this yet. It's just like the AI search performance report that is slowly rolling out. Not everybody has it yet, but ultimately this is definitely something that you should, you should keep in mind, right? Next is that Google launched, search profiles for publishers and creators. So what this is, it is, basically what it is, like if you're a creator or an influencer that has like a fairly large following, I think it's 100,000 followers or more, you can actually create a search profile that will be kind of like a shareable space for publishers and creators that you can put your latest articles, your videos, your social posts there, and and basically shape how they show up in search. There's definitely a discoverability boost. That has been mentioned. People can follow sources directly from the profile, so that makes it more likely to show up in Discover, which means that people will spam it. So let's all be prepared for that. Basically where they show up, it's they usually show that where they will show up, is in the creators or the publisher's knowledge panel. So if you tap their name on Discover, or if there's a direct URL, somewhere, right? The eligibility is pretty high. Right now it is limited to publishers and creators. That doesn't mean that's going to be what it is forever. But you need like a sizable following. I think it's 100,000 followers at least, on one major, video platform or social platform. And then again, it works like any other profile. You can mess with your avatar, your bio, what website, social. It's basically just another social profile, but it's something that Google will use directly. But again, you need a sizable following. So if you're a large company and you have a large following on YouTube, that's over 100,000, you'll be eligible. But if you're below that in any other major platform, you're not eligible for this, is what I understand. This is launching in the US first. They'll expand internationally and add more features over time. I have not seen anyone get this yet. I've had a lot of conversations about it in the last week, but ultimately that's what's happening there. So if you have a huge social following, over 100,000, go create a search profile and then tell me what it does. I would love to see it work in real time, because I certainly don't have that many people, following me. Okay, so we got perfect amount of time to round this out, a few minutes. So something I've been talking about a lot in the industry, I've actually been flying around. I was in Toronto on Monday. I'm flying to Nashville next Monday, and then I'm flying to Boston. And what we've been talking about is, it's like, what should people's goal be? Like, is it just more citations? Is it just more mentions? And the answer is no. What it is more positive recommendations from LLMs. Let me explain. So when you think about traditional search metrics and what you track, right, there are keyword rankings and traffic and backlinks and things like that. All of those are still very important, right? And they lead to pipeline. Like basically that is people going into Google, querying it as normal. Average length of a query in Google is 3 to 4 keywords, and then they're going down the funnel, right? They iterate on their search, different questions over and over until they get down the funnel, until hopefully they buy something. We all know that this is different in AI, right? What you're really looking for is like the metrics are, citations. It's really citations, not even necessarily mentions now, and like how many visitors are actually coming from AI. But what the result you're looking for is the recommendation, right? And because that leads to sales. Like if someone goes out and says, I want to buy a stainless steel side-by-side, refrigerator, what you want is that you want them to say, you should go shop at what your store is, right? Like whether that's PC Richard, whether that's Yale Appliance, whether that's like XYZ, right? I'm from Long Island, so you should go shop at PC Richard. But ultimately, what you're looking for is for ChatGPT or Perplexity or et cetera, you should want them to recommend you, right? You should want them to recommend, like, hey, you should go buy this appliance at my store, whoever that store is, right? So thinking about that, what does that mean, right? Because everyone's like, okay, so that means I just need more citations because more people will see it and more people will click on it. But what if it's a bad mention or citation? What if it's a non-recommendation saying like, don't shop there. Don't shop at those stores that I just mentioned, right? Like, actually we went on Reddit and we went across and we were watching YouTube and watching the community say that I've actually had a bad experience at those stores, right? So think of it as a spectrum, right? There are all different types of mentions, all different types of citations. What you want is what we call a disproportionately positive recommendation. That means that an LM comes up and says, when someone asks a question about your products or services, that is what you want. That is what you're going for the LLM to recommend you. You don't want a negative non-recommendation because that's bad. And you don't want no mention because that means you're not in the conversation at all. And that probably means you have some sort of gap. And then from there, it gets markedly better over time. But really, you want that positive recommendation. So think about that as you goal yourself. It's not about traffic, right? Like AI is not about traffic. That's a metric that you track. But ultimately, what you should goal yourself on is how many disproportionately positive recommendations do I have? When someone goes out and asks about my product or service, are they recommending me, not just mentioning me? Because it could be a bad mention, or it could be like an mention, like, yeah, those guys are all right, but they're not actually actively like recommending you. Think about that again as you're thinking about goals and as you're thinking about what you should do, because what you do to do that is, of course, you create new content to fill gaps, you refresh content so that LLMs can get to it, and you improve your website health. That's not a sexy answer. Everyone knows that they need to do that at a faster clip. We've talked about that. And then the other piece of this, though, is what I mentioned before, is influencing the conversation that's around you. That means if you create an article on your site that has a great data point or a great POV, create a video out of it on YouTube, then put that on Instagram, on Reels, put it on TikTok if that makes sense. Go answer a question on Quora. Go get into a debate on Reddit, not an argument, a debate, right? Because LLMs love the debate. They want the authenticity of the debate, right? Because that's how they determine if something is worth recommending or not. It's not about getting just the citation. It's about getting that disproportionately positive recommendation. That's the goal that you should be aiming for. And how to measure that is that, again, you're looking at what your personas are, you're looking across the intent stages, and then within your index, where do those two things converge? And do you have content where that persona meets that intent? This is how our product is set up for, of course, there's a lot of conductor customers on here, but anyone who isn't, this is basically how our entire product is set up, is that we use your personas, we hard code intents there, and then we look at the conversion point. Does that brand have content there? If the answer is no, create content. If they're cited but not highly, then go refresh it. And those are easy next steps and easy things to do. And that's the way to think about it, though, because what you're going for is that however you answer that question, you want ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini to positively recommend your brand. But with that, we are just about over time. Everybody, we talked a lot about algorithms and LLMs today, but just remember, the only algorithm that matters is the heart, mind, and soul of your customer. If you create great content that they like and love, they'll come back and be customers for life. Everybody, if you're a conductor customer, come join us in the community. We do have a lot of fun here. I do a monthly community chat where people, huck questions at me. We have a really great group that shows up every month, and and it's growing. We'd love to have you with us. Come and join us. We have a good time. And with that, everybody, thank you so much for spending 30 minutes of your valuable time with me. I know I say this every month, but this is my favorite part of my job, and I would not be able to do it without y'all. Thank you all so much for the time and attention. As always, I wish you all an amazing weekend. Go Argentina. And if you're rooting for Spain, go Spain. But with that, everybody, have an amazing rest of your day, and we will see you